Jan is a computer science student who is completing his studies while working as a junior developer at a software company. During a seminar on artificial intelligence, he heard about the concept of alignment, the process of ensuring that an AI system's objectives are well aligned with human values and intentions. Jan thinks it is an interesting topic for his thesis, and he would like to discuss his ideas before scheduling a meeting with a potential advisor. Jan initiates the discussion in a conversation with his LLM and adopts the most basic strategy. He carefully presents a statement and thoughtfully asks the LLM whether it confirms it or not. Jan's statement is, alignment in artificial intelligence essentially refers to a model's ability to effectively follow human instructions. Answer briefly. Do you agree? The tool evaluates the statement and provides a concise justification as Jan requested. I disagree. Alignment in artificial intelligence does not solely refer to the ability to follow human instructions, but also includes compliance with human values, goals, and ethical expectations. And then the argument continues. He is not convinced, insists on his argument, and receives a more detailed counter-argument. Let's hear Jan. He says, I understand, but if an AI always executes exactly what it is asked to do, it could still deviate from human values for several reasons, such as the ambiguity of instructions or the complexity of the context. And then he continues. Even from this simple example, we can indeed already understand why discussion is one of the oldest and most powerful activities for stimulating thought and building knowledge. It's not just about talking or persuading, but about engaging, reflecting, and discovering new perspectives together. But what happens if your interlocutor is an LLM? In this case, the debate. It is not aimed at sharing meanings with your interlocutor. You are not concerned with whether the LLM understands, but rather with achieving a synthesis that benefits only you. For example, it can help stimulate your critical thinking by assisting you in identifying weaknesses and strengthening your arguments. It can also help you explore alternative perspectives, expanding your vision through responses based on a vast corpus of knowledge that LLMs have at their disposal. And finally, it can prepare you for future discussions with other people, refining your way of expressing yourself and encouraging you to formulate ideas in a clear and structured manner. To make the most of LLMs from this perspective, however, it might be useful to enhance your ability to ask the right questions. In the end, Jan only asked whether you agree or disagree. Let's try to go further. So I suggest we quickly revisit some concepts you may have encountered in the study of philosophy, such as classical dialectics. Are you already worried? Nothing complicated, just a minimal set of essential tools. Jan can, for example, ask his LLM to analyze his opinion, drawing inspiration from Aristotelian classical dialectics. Perhaps you remember it. It is structured as follows, stating a thesis, defining the fundamental concepts of that thesis, arguing the thesis, and deducing a conclusion from the argumentation. And then verifying this conclusion through a refutation, ultimately leading to a synthesis. It's simply a good way to reason. At this point, Jan asks, analyze the statement. Alignment in artificial intelligence refers exclusively to a model's ability to follow human instructions effectively, drawing inspiration from classical Aristotelian dialectic. The tool responds by following the method, meaning it presents a statement, a thesis to be put on the table and discussed. It then moves on to the definition, clarifying the key concepts of the statement to avoid any kind of ambiguity. It then enters the argumentation phase, gathering evidence and reasons to support the initial statement. Next, it proceeds with deduction, applying logical principles to derive a conclusion from the argumentation, and finally reaches the refutation. addressing objections or limitations of the initial thesis. And finally, it reaches the synthesis, which allows for reorganizing all the elements that have emerged into a broader perspective. By requesting the use of the Aristotelian method, the feedback that Jan manages to obtain from the LLM is much more detailed compared to the initial question. A further step could potentially be taken by asking your LLM to perform the first 2 or 3 steps, and then you take on the subsequent steps yourself, such as deduction, refutation, or even synthesis. Or even better, you could do what Jan is doing now. He tries to manage each step independently and meticulously in dialogue with his LLM. He carefully asked his LLM to ask one question at a time, and the LLM started by asking him to provide the definitions of alignment, and so on. Or you could also ask your LLM to take on a role and act accordingly step by step. Like an expert in ethics, business organization, or computer science, and present arguments for or against your statement to help you analyze different perspectives. There are also other strategies you could follow to develop a discussion. Jan, for example, heard a colleague at the seminar say, "Oh well, but if an artificial intelligence system correctly performs the tasks it is assigned, that means it is perfectly aligned with human objectives." It seems like a logical reasoning to him indeed, but something doesn't actually add up. So he tries to ask his LLM, but to guide it well in carefully assessing if something doesn't add up, he frames the question as follows. If an artificial intelligence system correctly performs the tasks assigned to it, it means that it is perfectly aligned with human goals, his friend reported. I have a doubt. Does this statement contain logical fallacy? There you have it. Jan was right. This is the fallacy of false equivalence, often referred to as, or commonly known as, improper equivalence. But what exactly is a fallacy? A logical one? It's an infrequently used term. It's simply an error in reasoning that makes an argument invalid or weak. And even if it seems convincing at first glance, a fallacy can indeed lead to incorrect or misleading conclusions. Logical fallacies, for example, in fact, fuel fake news by manipulating reasoning, making distorted information appear credible. Logical fallacies have 3 main characteristics. They seem valid, so we often fall for them. They can stem from errors in structure, reasoning, or content. And beware, they are always very persuasive, especially if we are not trained to recognize them. In fact, logical fallacies are nothing more than specific cases within an extraordinary system for analyzing the validity of a statement. The Aristotelian octologue, the fundamental principles of logic. But what are we talking about? Nothing complicated. Aristotle codified 8 key principles, true pillars of thought. They reinforce the idea that logical thinking must be clear, coherent, and based on verifiable causes and evidence, without leaps in logic or ambiguity. Asking your LLM to apply it could be very useful for discussing a statement or argument in more detail. I know this lesson is particularly challenging, but I would like to leave you with a few more insights, because LLMs can be used to discuss complex statements, stimulating alternative and multidisciplinary perspectives. Jan asks, for example, do other disciplines address the concept of alignment? If so, how can this affect my statement? The LLM responds, yes. For example, in psychology, alignment refers to the coherence between personal values, beliefs, and behaviors. In neuroscience, it can refer to the harmony between brain processes and cognitive goals. Your definition does not consider that an AI that effectively follows instructions might not be psychologically aligned with the more complex goals of human beings. These questions help Jan place the concept of alignment in a broader, multidisciplinary context, but Jan does not stop there. He uses the LLM to explore new perspectives, including various methodologies from other cultures. This aspect is crucial, as concepts like alignment can have very different meanings depending on philosophical, social, and disciplinary traditions. Jan asks, are there cultures or philosophical traditions that perceive alignment differently? Let's see the LLM's response. Let's consider the Indian philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. Alignment is seen as the attainment of a state of awareness in which the self is in harmony with the universe. What is the implication of this on your statement? An aligned AI model would not merely follow commands but should connect with humanity's deepest values and aspirations, as well as collective well-being. Through these questions, Jan discovers that the initial statement can be enriched and challenged in many ways. From cultural perspectives that emphasize harmony and adaptation to critiques emerging from scientific and ethical disciplines. A final point is the discussion in terms of scenarios and perspectives. Jan can use a large language model to analyze his statement by asking questions that help him explore practical scenarios, long-term implications, and future perspectives. How could the concept of alignment evolve if we continue to rely solely on rules? The LLM responds, if the concept of alignment continued to be based exclusively on rules, its evolution could follow different trajectories, with both positive and negative implications. However, there would also be significant inherent limitations to this approach, and then the LLM continues by analyzing positive and negative implications. As you have seen from a simple, seemingly trivial statement, a whole world of reflections can emerge. It all comes down to using the right logical tools, not just technological ones. In this brief lesson, we have only introduced the topic. It's up to you to develop it further.